For this project, we'll be designing a plywood tote in Fusion 360 with the intent to fabricate using hand-operated power tools. Now, before I start in Fusion 360, I like to do some quick research of existing designs. I like to assess the materials that I plan on using, take some critical measurements both of the materials and of the parts that I plan to put into our design, and then create a rough hand sketch with some notes. So doing a quick search online, I found a range of different totes, and I grabbed 6 designs that kind of caught my eye. We could do tool totes. There's lots of different parts totes out there. There's soda totes, sparkling cider totes that hold the glass compartments, and some nifty kind of flower gardening totes. For the design that I'm going to show you, I decided to go with this upper left hand, like general design. I kind of like the compartments on either end. It's fairly symmetrical. The center section, though, I kind of like this open compartment here of this blue and white design, and I like the round handle. So from there, I start kind of assessing the material. So for the project, we will have to work with a 1-inch diameter by 24-inch dowel rod and a piece of plywood that's nominally 3/4 inch by 11 3/4 by 96 inches. It's always a good idea to verify those dimensions. So I go in with calipers and measure the thickness first, and I can see that the nominal 3/4 is actually 0.71 inch. And the dowel rod thickness is, or diameter is still holding at 1 inch. I do verify that I have 11 3/4 and 96 inches using a conventional tape measure. And then I take a look at what I want to store or transport in this tote. And I have these red parts bins floating around the makerspace. So I'd like to have 2 of those on either end that I can change out. And I would like to just throw some basic hand tools in here. So my parts bins, I notate that they're 6 inches by approximately 3 inches. And they're 3 inches deep as well. And the largest tool I plan on putting in here, this hammer, is approximately 14 inches long. So looking at the hand sketch I generate, I start with this top view sketch. And I just want to incorporate these some of these critical dimensions that I took from the tools. So I know I want to have a 14-inch compartment in the center here. I need 3 inches by 6 inches to house the tool bin or the parts bins. And then on the side view, the height of our tote, the bins are 3 inches tall, so I'd like to have a slight lip of them hanging up so I can have a little lip to grab onto. So I'll make the internal height 2 3/4. And I'm just kind of guessing that this 1 3/4 will be a good handle height. I do a quick sketch of the end profile. I know that in general I'm going to have a shape that comes around and houses this handle that goes across. From there, I take these critical dimensions and I make note of, I name them, and I notate them up in this left-hand corner. And we're going to be using these dimensions to drive parameters in Fusion. And these are rough dimensions at the moment. They can always be changed in Fusion, but we're gonna go ahead on the next video and start in Fusion by incorporating these dimensions to drive the design. So to begin our tool tote, we'll start by creating some parameters that we'll use later to drive and define our sketches and extrudes. To access parameters, go to Modify, Change Parameters at the bottom, and this is where all your parameters are found. So we're going to go to this plus sign and add some new parameters. So we need to give it a name for the parameter. I like to keep it short. You can name it anything you want, but we'll start with thickness. So I'll use T. 1/2 inch material, and I'll give it a comment thickness. Now these values I'm giving, W for width, can be changed later on. So these are just kind of rough ideas of what we think the overall sizes will be. So for me, that's the overall width of the box. For the height, this will be the height of the tool compartment. And we'll do length as well. Now L is already used as a hotkey in other applications, so we can't use L, so we use LE for length. And start with 18 inches. It's not real critical that these are exactly what we want. They're just something close. We're going to go and fine tune that later on in the process. Now we'll go ahead and we'll save our new project. So we can go down to File menu and Save. You can also select the File key here. We're going to drop this in. I happen to be in the correct folder. I'm in the Engineering Class folder and Video Tutorial. I'll save this as Tote example. And save. So now we're at version 0. As we save it, it goes, sorry, version 1. As we continue to save it, each time we save it, we get a new version number. So now that we have our parameters established, we'll go ahead and start our sketch. To do that, we'll come over here to Create Sketch. And we have to choose what plane to sketch on. So currently we have 3 existing planes. We have the top plane, the front plane, and the side plane. And we'll start our box by sketching on the front plane. I'm gonna start with the rectangle that's the front tool compartment rectangle. So I will come down to the sketch toolbar and select rectangle. I'm going to use a center point rectangle. In the future, I can type in R and it'll directly snap to the rectangle tool. Now the pointer, we have to select a point to start from. I'm going to select the origin because it's automatically going to give me a constraint to the origin. So I left click, pull out my rectangle, and then left click again to place it. Now I'll hit escape to get out of the rectangle tool. And if you'll notice, the perimeter of the rectangle is blue, which means it's undefined. We're going to go ahead and define it. Now we can define it using constraints, or we can define it using dimensions. So I'm going to go ahead and use dimensions. I'll go to the sketch toolbar. Down at the bottom, you'll find sketch dimension. And I will select this bottom line. Now this is going to be the length, the overall length of the box. So I'll use our parameter LE, length. Enter. We'll zoom out a little bit using the scroll wheel. And then I'll define this edge as it's the height of our tool tip. So now everything's black. We have a fully defined sketch. Nothing can really move anymore. I'll hit escape to get out of the dimension tool. Now I want to draw the rectangle that's going to be the partition that is our handle. So I'll go ahead and type R on the keyboard for rectangle. And the default rectangle is a point-to-point, 2-point rectangle. And we can modify that over here in our sketch palette. You can select any of these, but I'm going to keep it on the 2-point rectangle, and I will select down here on the bottom line. It will snap to it. Left click, bring it up. Left click again. And now I just need to define it to let it go black. I want it to also have to be defined by the center. So what I'll do is create a construction line, and I'll use this origin point to snap to. If I come up here, when you see this triangle, it means I'm at the center point of the line. You'll notice that the line I just created is not perpendicular. I want it to be vertical up and down. So we have a tool over here, a horizontal vertical constraint. It will select that, select the line. I could have also selected a perpendicular constraint, be perpendicular between these two lines. Now I want this to be a construction line, so I'll select the line, come over here, select construction. Now it's a construction line. Now I still need to define the height, so I'll type dimension, or D on the keyboard for dimension. And you notice I selected this line, so it's going to give me the overall dimension. I want a dimension in D from here to this line. I want that to be my driving dimension, and I'm going to have that at 3 inches. And now the rectangle can still move in and out, but it's symmetrical. It's locked to the center. So I need to give it a couple more dimensions or constraints. So what I'll do is I'm going to use dimensions. I'll dimension from here to here. And I want that to be 3 1/4. So now we're fully defined on our 2 rectangles. The last element I want to add in is going to be the cutout for the handle up in here. So I'll go to my sketch toolbar and select the slot tool. And I want to use a center slot. I'll left click roughly where I want it, drag it over, left click again, drag it down, left click one last time, enter. And now I just need to define our slot here. So I'll use D for dimension to dimension the radius here. I want to have a 1/2 inch radius. I'd like to have the dimension from the top of the handle to be 1/2 inch as well. And now I need to define where it sits in here. So I can use another center line and draw it up here, or I can define the 2 outside edges. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a dimension constraint. So it will go from the center to the edge. Now I want that to be, say, 2 inches. And I'll do the same thing over here. Now, instead of typing in 2, I want that to be, these 2 to be the same. So if I just select previously, any dimension out here, it will drop it into here, into our toolbar. We get a little FX, so it's driven. And when we modify this, it automatically modifies this dimension. So hit escape, everything's fully defined. I'll go ahead and save at this point. Now that we've developed the front sketch, we'll go ahead and develop the next sketch. We'll select the Create Sketch tool, rotate around, and we want to select the plane that's perpendicular to our previous sketch. And I'm going to start by drawing the rectangle that is our base. So I'll do R on the keyboard. I'm going to use this center point rectangle from the origin, drag it out, hit escape to get out of the rectangle tool, D for dimension. We want this base here to be the width of our box, so that's going to be W. And we want the height to be the height of our tool compartment. So that rectangle is fully defined. Now I need to draw the partition that holds in the handle up here. To do that, I'll use the line tool. So I'll select line on the L on the keyboard for line. And I want to come over approximately the thickness of the material and select on this line, but I don't want to select on the corner here. So select, and then I'm going to bring it up, but left click, and I'm going to continue to hold the left mouse button down and drag this guy around. lift up on the mouse button, and finally click on the line here. And that gives us a line with an arc in there. And we are tangent at this point, but not over here. So we'll give it a tangent constraint. Let escape to get the tangent constraint tool. And we need these two lines to be equal. So I'll give it an equal constraint. Two lines are now equal. We'd like for this arc to be in the center of everything. We want this all to be symmetrical. So I'll use a construction line from the center here. I'll type line, L on the keyboard for line. Select at the midpoint or at the origin point. Bring it up to the midpoint, which is that triangle. And we need this to be in a vertical orientation. So come down here and select the vertical. I would also like this to be a construction line. So I'm going to go ahead and select the construction tab. And I'll start dimensioning some of these elements. So I'll make this 1.5 inches. I'd like this to be the thickness of our material, which we established earlier in the parameters is T. And then I just need to define the height of this arch. I'd like this arch to be a consistent distance above this point. So I'll try dimensioning from that point to this point and see if it takes. And it looks like it does. So 0.5. And you'll notice there's a purple tab here, which means it's using another sketch element to define this sketch. So it's linked to the original sketch. We'll take one last look at it. That's everything I'd like to do on that sketch. I'll go to Stop Sketch, and I want to save. Okay, so to wrap up our intro sketching, we'll do a top sketch that will be the bottom of the box. So we'll go back to the sketch tool, create sketch, rotate around. We want to select the this top plane here, and we'll do another rectangle, R, center point rectangle. Hit escape. The dimensions we want to use here, we just like D on the keyboard for dimension. We want to use length. And we want to use width. So that's our fully defined bottom sketch. We'll exit sketch or stop sketch. So now if we rotate this around, we have a rough representation of our toolbox elements. And it's a good time to go back in. Here's where our sketches are held. It's a good time to go back in and rename these sketches. So if you highlight them, I'm going to call this one the front sketch. Enter. Side sketch. You can name these anything that helps you remember what they are. And the top sketch, or we'll call it the bottom sketch. And we'll save. And that concludes the early sketching. Later on, we'll come back and we'll add decorative elements into these sketches, but for now, this will be sufficient. Okay, so now that we have our sketches created, we want to start generating the parts. To do that, we'll be using the Extrude tool. You can find the Extrude tool in the Create tab. You can open up the drop-down, select Extrude, or they give you a prompt that if you type an E on the keyboard, you can also bring up the Extrude command. Within the Extrude command, we have a few different options.
The first option is you need to select profile. So we will select profile of our long side. The second tab gives us an option to extrude from the profile plane, from an offset distance from the profile plane, or from an object. We want to attach it to the corresponding sketch, so we're going to select from an object. The object we want to attach to is the corner of our left-hand sketch. And what this does is when we go to modify the sketch later on, when the drawing is more complicated, it will expand with the sketch, so the side will move with the sketch. Now, if you notice, there's an arrow pointing outward, and it's outward from this line here. We want to keep our box component within the confines of the sketch, and to do that, we'll give it a negative extrude value. So we'll come down to this extrude distance, go negative T, which is the value of the thickness of our material. We have options for the type of operation. If we had other bodies in here, we could join them together. We could cut them. We can cut away intersections. This is our first body, so we're going to select the new body tab. And OK. So now the sketches that we used have been hidden. If we want to see them again, we can select the light bulbs, and it brings them back up. So now we'll continue on extruding. E on the keyboard, select the elements we want to extrude from an object, select the object extrude point, and the value. It's a new body. OK. We'll do the other sides now. From an object, select that point. It's extruding outwards, so we want to give it a negative T. Fusion automatically defaults to a cut. We want to add a new body. OK. You'll notice that the bodies intersect now. We'll take care of that in a later tutorial, but it's fine that they intersect at the moment. So we'll continue on. E for extrude. Select the component we want to extrude from an object. Select the object point. Give it a value for the amount of extrude and new body. Now for the internal partitions, E for extrude. From an object. Negative T. New body. OK. E for extrude. From object. Select the extrude point. E for material thickness. New body. OK. Now we'll do the handle next. So the handle plane is already on at the center of where we'd like it. Looking down on it, it's right in the middle. So what we can do is we can keep it on the profile plane, select a symmetric extrude, and you have the option for a half length or a whole length. The half length will extrude our distance value 2 times. So if we have our distance is going to be T, it will be 2 times T. So we would like to select this halfway point. Our total thickness will be T. And we want a new body. Hit OK. Final part is the bottom. We'll select the bottom profile. And we want to offset it from an object. We want that object to be this point of the sketch. So if it selects the body, and we update the body later by doing a cut that's separate, it will give us a default that we later have to go back and fix. So we want to make sure we're selecting the sketch point. So if you hover over the sketch point and hold down the left mouse button, it gives you options to select the face of the sketch point or the face of the extruded body. We want to make sure we're selecting the sketch point. And it looks like the arrow is going upwards, which is what we want. We want to be a value of T, material thickness, and we want a new body. So now we have all of our extruded bodies. There's an issue with them intersecting, but we're going to take care of that in the next video. We can hide these sketches to get a little bit better picture. And if you notice here, there's a new bodies folder created. You can go back in here by double clicking, and you can rename each of the bodies. I'm not going to do that. I don't think it's totally necessary, but if it's a preference, really. You can also, each of the extrudes that we performed generated a tick in the timeline. If you hover over them, it shows you what the function is. It's an extrude, and it highlights the component that was extruded. If you double click on it, you can go back in here and modify any of the selections you've done to add or take away. So now that we have our bodies, we need to clean up the intersections. A nice way to do that is using the Combine tool. You can find the Combine tool in the Modify dropdown. Select Combine. It allows us to merge two bodies to make them into one unit, cut away, or to intersect, cut away at intersection. We'll be using the Cut tool. And what we want to do is keep the tool. So we'll be selecting a target body that we want to cut, and then we'll be selecting bodies that are being used to cut, and those are the tools. We want to keep those. So we'll select this side first, and we want to use the other sides as well as the bottom to cut away. Okay, so now this original side has been cut down. It's nice and clean. We'll do the same thing for all of the sides. To repeat a command, you can right click and come up. It allows you to repeat. Brings up the exact same tab. We'll select tool to be cut, or the body to be cut, and then the tools to use to cut it. Okay. We'll continue on repeat. We'll select the internal partition. If you select a tool that you don't really want, you can just deselect it. Right click, repeat, using the outside parts. Right click, repeat. Want to cut the side using the bottom. Right click, repeat, using the bottom. So it looks like we have everything but the handle now. So we'll right click. Want to cut the handle using the sides and the bottom. So now we have a nice clean box. It's been trimmed away. You can rotate it around and check to make sure everything is trimmed away. Now we're ready to start making this box. So we'll move on in the next tutorial to dropping this box into a drawing sheet that will give us a tool to use in the workshop to cut out our parts. Now that we've extruded our simple tool tote and cleaned up the interferences, we can go ahead and drop this into the drawing page. To do that, we go to Model, select Drawing, it's from Design. We'll go ahead and change our sheet size to 8.5 by 11 because it's easy to print. And okay. Now immediately it brings up the our tool tote front view by default, and we'll just select anywhere on the page, and we'll go ahead for now and go with the default settings and select OK. Now looking at the page, it brings in this title block format, and for what we're doing, I don't think it's necessary, so I'm going to go ahead and deselect title block in the display border. And I'm going to select our original drawing view, and I'm going to add projected views. So I can do a top view and a side view. And I'll go ahead and do an isometric view as well. I hit escape. It'll release us from that projected view tool. I'm going to drag this down to the corner over here. If you left click and then left click again, it lets you move the views around. I'm going to go ahead and right click in the original view and come up to edit view. And I'm gonna try and increase the scale a bit so it's a little easier to see. And it looks like a quarter scale will fit. Close that out. And just get these guys centered on the sheet. There we go. And the dimensioning is kind of a personal preference. I'm going to dimension the views that I think will help me make this tool tote. And to do that, just type D, same as in the model space. And I'll start with the overall size. Now, if you notice, it's only giving us no decimal places. I can modify that over here. Annotation settings. I can select display trailing zeros. And then I'll continue to dimension by typing D using the dimension tool. And I'll drop down again, it's the dimensions that I feel are necessary to fabricate. And for me, that is sufficient. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And we'll just keep the same file name.